Okay, hello my gangsters. Today Truth Detective is here to do you a book review with a very experimental color scheme that doesn't match this book or its theme or anything at all. But aren't professional criminals all faggots anyway, so let's dive into this. This book is about the Comorra and the Narjageda, the other Italian mafia. And this book doesn't deal with the Cosa Nostra. It's a later book written by Dickie. It came out in something like 2016, and he goes over much better written than the Cosa Nostra book into the workings of the mafia and what they do and the heinous crimes that they have done, and also the seemingly good things that they have produced in the society. It goes very much in depth over here in this book into the fascist regime that started in the 1920s and led up to the World War II, and a lot of these mafia guys, they left Italia in the 20s for United States of the Americas. And what was new for me over here is that there was this mafia family. I knew this mafia family in New York City called the Genovese. And the Genovese family was actually a fascist mafia family according to this guy, but they still, I believe they left Italia because the fascist regime was against mafia in general. You couldn't really be a fascist mafioso there. So they tried to get rid of some of the random type of crime that was in Italia in those times. One other thing that started me thinking about, the Italian type of business stuff was related to this town called, or city called Naples, and also the mountain of Pellegrino. In Finland, you can buy this brand of water named Pellegrino, and it actually comes from Italia. It has fluoride in it, by the way, some trace amounts. I wouldn't drink it myself because of that, but interestingly, the near parts of the Pellegrino mountain are infested with mafia activity, which is pretty interesting. So it's plausible that if you drink that water brand, you are kind of funding also some mafia connections. And there's bound to be a lot of business that is tied into this mafia game, because in Italia they have something called the protection racket. It means that these mafioso or these entrepreneurs or farmers, they buy protection from the criminals against the criminals themselves, but also against any other type of threat that comes from the outside to their business or their livelihood. So the criminals are in the business of violence. It means that they buy a violent type of protection from the criminals. So if their business is fucked with, if they are fucked with, then the mafia, they use violence to handle the situation. And it's ugly stuff that what comes out of this in the end. There's talk about the rituals that the mob uses, and these rituals are interestingly only related to the Comorra. He didn't really talk about rituals related to the Cosa Nostra and the other mafia, the Narjageda. I believe it's so global at this point. He laid it out that the Narjageda mafia, they have activity in German I think in the United States also, in many European countries, and I think even in some Asian countries that they have some activity in. So it's a global type of criminal network. And the Camorra, I learned from here that it's more Italian specific. And it's more of a secret society. They have rituals and they have secret code language. And symbolism, kind of like the Freemasons. And he draws some connections over here with the Freemasons, because he has also written a book about the Freemasons. When I read the Cosa Nostra book, I said that I won't be reading more from this guy. But I'm actually pretty glad that I did get this book. And the reason why I got this book was because the local, I don't mean the local, but the internet bookstore I buy my book from, got this book in the, what is it called, like in their warehouses. So I thought, I might as well order it because it's very cheap. And I would feel that you could write you can write, there are a couple of books like The 5 Families about the New York mob, and it's a 800-page book about the history of the mob in New York. And it's about the 5 families, and the Genovese are one of those families, and the Gambino is one other, and what were the other families? Bonanno is the third one of those mafia families. And these families, some of them, some of these, like all the Italian families, they have of course their roots in Italia, but there were gangsters in America other than Italian. There were Jewish and there were Irish gangsters also. And these gangs, they were kind of different, and their style was different. I haven't really read about the Jewish and the Irish gangs yet. I'm going to, because they have a lot of history. And for example, the founding of Las Vegas, because the gambling was actually illegal in America. That doesn't really relate to the Italian scene anymore, but gambling was illegal in America. And the founders of Las Vegas, the gambling capital of the world nowadays, were Jewish gangsters. And there was this one guy called Bugsy Siegel was the name. And there's a lot of going there, but that's the Jews. That's not the Italians. So Italians are, I think, Catholic, and they the Catholic Church has some connections to the mafia, but in this book he doesn't really talk about it. It's probably more related to the Cosa Nostra, so Sicilian mafia. And the Camorra, it's I think it's from, does it operate mainly in Naples then? I have no idea about this, because I've never been to Italy and I don't really understand the continent so well, the country so well in that sense. But it was interesting to read this book, and the part about the ritual was probably the most interesting, because in secret societies, these rituals that give the members this kind of special feeling that they belong is very important. And he laid out the ritual over here so that in the finger, or the trigger finger usually of this mafia initiate, is prickled, so there's like a wound, and they drop like blood on this picture, usually of Archangel Michael. So and they burn some of the picture, and the initiate holds the picture in his hands while the picture is burning. And it's a kind of a ritual that has pain of many kind related to it, and it leaves an imprint on the subconscious mind of the initiate for sure, because pain is used in that way in the ritual. And it also makes this kind of a, I thought about the symbolism of the ritual, and I kind of thought that when you think about fire and this symbol of like burning something that has your blood on it, it's kind of a message that you make the people that fuck with you, you make them bleed first, you know, like retaliation and attack first. Like, this is not about self-defense, you know. The mafia, of course, does this protection game, but they also do a lot of, you know, violence that is just, you know, provoked by themselves, you know. Some of these guys are pretty fucking heinous, what you read from these books. And in the later book, the Cosa Nostra, he talked about the brutal environment of Italia in many ways. I don't know how like brutal, you know, like what kind of, you know, dangerous animals live in Italia. I don't know. I have no clue about that. But the heat of the country sounds pretty brutal at some points. There's some pictures over here, and some have been taken from these mafiosos, like homes that have been, you know, these guys have been arrested. And there's one picture that looks kind of like this, just a place perfect for kind of shady ritual type of stuff. And it's interesting, but the interesting thing over here, he says that in the American Mafia there was also some rituals in the Italians, I mean. But what I read from the other books that I learned from is that these rituals, they were never mentioned in those books. So it's a kind of grain of salt thing. And for example, when you think about some gangsters like Al Capone, it's highly plausible that he had kind of gotten away with most of the Italians' ways, and he didn't talk of himself in the same way as a man of honor. You know, that's what these people call themselves, man of honor or man of tradition. As for example, this guy, Joseph Bonanno, and this man was Italian, and he went back to Sicily in his life one time, but he was so American that he just, when he was there, he wanted to get back. And I don't really wonder why, because when you compare America and the Italia, it felt that America had a lot more promise to these guys, and I believe that the fascist regime actually granted a fucking huge blessing for these guys when they excommunicated them to the Americas. And they did in a sense, they did a huge favor, because some of these guys became hugely wealthy and like successful, and got caught maybe in later parts of their life, and some of them didn't even serve that long prison sentences in America, even though they might have been, you know, even behind very violent crime. And it's amazing, like the past is amazing in America, you know, like the things people got away with was amazing, but usually the bad guys still got caught in the end. Usually they did. And it's the funniest, sometimes it was the funniest ways that they got caught in the end. Yeah. So that's it. I like this book, and I'm kind of doubting in my mind if I will read the Craft book by this man. What he has written a third book about the mob called the Mafia Republic, but that book doesn't interest me at all. What I read from its description is it's this kind of, you know, like media game, you know, like I don't care about that. And when he talks over here about what the media says about the mob, you know, it's always kind of, you know, this it's bullshit anyway. And that's one of the reasons I wouldn't recommend maybe you read that book, Five Families, because the writer, when the writer is a journalist, you can be pretty sure that much of the book is bullshit anyway. You know, I don't have much respect for journalism and journalists. You know, I think they are bullshit writers. I think that they are not. I think journalists are not real writers, but they can sometimes write good books. I'm not saying that they don't have the skill to write. It's just that most of the time they have that kind of style of writing that makes it such tedious, you know, type of like reading process that I don't really dig that, you know. So what I liked about this guy is that he's a historian. And even though he, you know, maybe doesn't have such of a clue to the mob as maybe this guy who was really himself a mob boss in America, then still, you know, I think it's better to be a historian than to be a journalist. But the best thing is to be the guy yourself, the best, like, where you're gonna find the best thing is always with the autobiography. I feel it just applies to so many things. For example, like Gandhi. You want to understand about Gandhi, you shouldn't like probably read a biography written by somebody else. You should read his own biography, and it's a great book. And I freaking, you know, I'm really bummed that one time I gave away my Gandhi, my experiments with the truth biography, because it was kind of great, but I was very young. I mean, in a sense, very young when I read it. I was something like 21, and I was starting to really read at that point. I was buying books like mad, you know. I spent so much money on books back then, and I read the book through, but I gave it away. I hope that at some point, you know, the book will find its way back to my hands. But also, you know, Gandhi, it was very, you know, this kind of a political zealot, you know, and I don't really dig that a lot. And what I feel over here is that the mob is kind of involved in that stuff, but at the same time, with the fascist regime, you understood that when a tougher dog comes on the scene, then these guys, they kind of fled, you know. it was like a tougher dog. Yeah, so you start to question these things, that the mob had a protection even from the law. But when you get a dictatorship, you know, like that, you find yourself in a very, very hard situation in terms of human rights and what is right and wrong in the general term, you know, like the whole population might lose their grasp of like reality. And that's the reason probably why the mob had its place, even like it has not disappeared anywhere. It's there, and it has its place, I believe, just because of that. Because without that kind of, you know, thing, we might get this, you know, like regime where we start to think that the way of acting like this becomes like kind of okay, and we can justify it more easily. But here we understand it's crime, you know. So that's Mafia Brotherhoods, a freaking jam-packed review for you. A lot of understanding brought from here about the history of America, the history of American drug trade. In the Cosa Nostra book, he talked more about the drug trade and the drugs and the drug trade of New York, for example, how the opioid epidemic kind of started. Italians had a kind of a hand in that, and the heroin of America came mostly from Italia. There's a lot of heroin refineries in Italia. and where they produce the drug, and I don't know what other drugs are produced or like cooked, so to say, in Italia. I have no idea, but heroin is one of those drugs, and it ended up creating huge addiction problems, you know, in America during those times. And what came clear over here is that the Camorra is involved also in prostitution in Italy, or at least was. And the Cosa Nostra wasn't involved in prostitution, and this is kind of also applicable to many American gangsters, that they had, you know, kind of disputes over what the mafia should be involved. Some were all for gambling, illegal business like the alcohol business back in the Prohibition times. Some were for drugs, some were for prostitution, some were for strong arming and violence, you know, using violence to extort money. And usually the money was the reason that they were involved in this. But what you understand from over here about the Italian mob is that there are times when the Italian mob is really not about the money, and they have their kind of history in something called the Camorrists, and this is like 1800s, and these, you know, they had a tradition of dueling, and it was the honor, you know, the man of honor, the honor, you know, it comes from those times, the code of honor. And it was kind of the same as in Wild West, or in these places where if you were kind of, if you're what is it called, if you what is it called, like if somebody disrespects you, like respect, then some, you know, like duel like that can happen, you know, between men, and bodies can ensue from that. So that's it. That's the review. Fuck man, like I can't say anything more about this. That's what I learned from here, and this, like, what I have for over here, you see that it doesn't match to this book, at least this cover, or this, you know, it doesn't match at all. But I don't I wanted to try that for once. I also want to tell that there was one anti-mob or anti-mafia police officer, or was he even a detective over here that was named, and what was his name? He was very foundational in the fight against the mob, and I think that happened before the fascist regime also. And his life was kind of in danger also. So that's the truth many times with these law enforcement people also in Italia, that they put themselves in real danger. And there are some areas like in Americas where the police doesn't go, and for example in Naples there were these areas that the cops wouldn't go into, and that's pretty crazy stuff. That's pretty crazy stuff. But yeah, I can't really remember what was the man's name, but you can probably figure it out. You can probably figure it out if you are really interested in this stuff yourself. Yeah, I think that's it. Would I recommend this book for you? Well, it's probably not the most important book for you to read, but at the same time, during these times, I think it's good if you understand gang behavior, and it's good if you understand this thing. I feel.